Welcome back for our latest episode of the Association 100 podcast. I'm Colleen Gallagher, and I'm joined by my co-host, Meghan Henning. Today, we're going to talk through a tough topic we've been hearing from several association professionals on. They tell us that their association leadership is having a really difficult time in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe v. Wade, making a decision on what they should do about hosting events in cities with anti-abortion laws. And many of them are saying they're getting intense pressure from their members to pull out of these cities. And they are forced to having to balance that with the business decision of losing millions of dollars because of contracts that have been in place for sometimes 5 or more years. And then also potentially alienating members that might be on the other side of the issue. So it's quite a hot topic.
It certainly is a hot topic. I feel like this is such a difficult topic too, because you have Roe v. Wade, and regardless of your view, this has been something that has been so debated in the United States, and there are people on both sides of this issue, and there's not really like an easy answer. I feel like associations are in a bind for this. I don't know if you saw this, Colleen, but North Star Meetings Group recently ran this article called Abortion Laws Add Complexity to Destination Decisions for Events. And it was a survey that they fielded where 4 in 10 planners will consider abortion-related state legislation when selecting sites for meetings and conferences. And I was sort of not, I guess I wasn't shocked, but it just seems like that's a lot. So the study also revealed that 54% of that group said they won't meet in states with anti-abortion laws, and that 1/2 of corporate planners and 1/3 of trade show organizers said the law will have an impact on their destination decisions. And again, this is not really all that shocking because this sort of reflects the American view. Like the Pew Research showed that 61% of all Americans think abortion should be legal. Yet, it's such a hotly contested law that I just wonder how these associations balance this, because there are people on both sides of this issue very passionately.
Yeah, and I do think, like you said, I mean, Pew says 60%. I've heard some statistics up to 70% of Americans support it. So it is majority, but I do think on this one, the minority is incredibly vocal. Although, like you said, both sides are very passionate, obviously, because it's such an important issue, for women's rights. I did see the article, and I think one thing that was interesting was it raised the question of, can events be canceled for political reasons?
Yes.
Which, I mean, it's interesting. And you wonder, how do you make that decision, and can you do it without losing money by pulling out? So
right.
It talked about like including clauses in your contract in that.
Right. Which I guess this is the part that surprised me. There was a lawyer, Jonathan Howe of Howe and Hutton in Chicago, who said that you could basically have something that he was terming a political correctness clause in your contract, and that specifically mentioning Roe, to say you do not want to be in a state, because as we know, states are changing too. I mean, it's like some states have rules already and some don't. So should you put in specifically that should your state have anti-abortion laws in the next 90 days, we would be able to get out of this, which I thought was very interesting. The article also cited that somebody from LavaCon, which is a marketing group that puts an event on, they put in their contract that they were going to be in the state of Texas, and they said if that anything discriminated against anyone, they would leave. And when the version of Florida's bathroom bill went out, they invoked that clause and they left. So I'm just wondering if this
was Texas, not Florida, right?
Texas. It was in Texas. But I'm just wondering is this the new wave of what associations are going to do? And again, there are people on the other sides of these issues. Like, it's not as if the whole country believes in one thing. It's very challenging, I think.
It is challenging. And it's also challenging to think about like all the different things you have to include in a contract. I know when we worked at Consumer Technology Association, I was doing my first satellite media tour, and it was scheduled for the day that Michael Jackson died, and every station dropped us.
Yes.
And luckily our vendor rescheduled. They didn't charge us extra. They were very willing to work with us. But I remember after our boss came and said, every time we do an SMT contract going forward, we need to negotiate a Michael Jackson clause. In essence, if something huge newsworthy event, whether natural disasters or celebrity like deaths, things like that, that there would be an ability to reschedule. And it might be a small fee, but he wouldn't have to repay for the whole media tour to be booked. So there's just so many, not even politically related things, but just various elements that could impact your event and where you choose. So it's just, I mean, event planners have a lot on their plate these days, and the association leadership to make these decisions.
They really do. And you just wonder with some of the people that you and I have been speaking to who were sort of in this position where they said that they had members who were very irritated that different events were going on in these states with the anti-abortion issue. You wonder, like, if you boycott, do boycotts change anything? I mean, I don't know. I think maybe in this case it's possible that they could, but again, will they only change it for 50% of the people, because or 60% of the people, and then 40% are very angry. And you just kind of wonder, I think in some respects, is politics moving into the event space,
Yeah.
and is that a good thing? And how do you balance that? Is it going out to talk to your members and saying, like, what is it polling? I wonder if it's polling your members and saying, like, what do you think about these states, if we were, or what do you think about this law, and taking their temperature in that.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about, how you have to do it. And I think in addition to associations thinking about their membership, their decision, the other piece of this is, I mean, states passing these laws might lose a lot of business. So they need to consider if they can withstand that, if they're going to make these kinds of decisions. I know the article, the people they interviewed, they all seemed to say boycotts don't work. This just hurts the travel industry. But I don't know if I agree with that. When those bathroom bills were passing, I looked it back up to make sure, and I found a CNN article from 2017, and the lead sentence was, North Carolina lawmakers on Thursday passed a bill that repeals the state's controversial bathroom law in a movement to end a year of tumult that saw businesses leave and major sporting events and concerts canceled. So I do think that boycotts and business, especially, I mean, business has way more
Definitely.
power than the individual does. And if they pull out of states for things like this, they can make a stand and it can make a difference.
Yes. And I think you raise a really good point, because businesses can do that. But what about associations? I mean, do you
Right.
think that you end up where you make 50% or 60% of maybe your members happy? I mean, I think there are certain maybe associations who are dealing with the medical industry that they might 100% believe in something. But I find it hard to imagine that associations have 100% of their members feel the same about anything.
Right.
It's very challenging. So I wonder if the difference is with associations boycotting, does that hurt the association? I don't
Yeah.
know.
I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't
know the
know.
answer to that,
I
because
don't
I
know. And the
think
other,
that's challenging.
right, right. And then the next kind of piece of the article that fits into this conversation was, should you keep politics out of your decisions? And so when I was an employee at companies, I would immediately like say it's so easy to take a stand. And I also live in an area that is very liberal, and a lot of people around me have the same beliefs that I personally do. So I sometimes forget there are as many people that have different beliefs than me as there are. And I think that you have to remind yourself that your beliefs and your circle of friends are not always the
Yes.
everyone's thing. But as a business owner, now understand the difficulty in those decisions, because you're not just if you do something that ultimately like ruins the business, it's people's families that you feel responsible for. And I know that's so hard to say, because also if you don't take a stand, then you're hurting people too. So I understand that it is a much more difficult decision than it appears to be on paper.
Yes. Yes. And I totally agree with that, because I think that, would it be nice to keep politics out of your decisions? Yes, maybe you should try, but in so many different cases, like with the bathroom bill, and certainly with Roe versus Wade, because everybody, I feel like, has an opinion on. It's not something that you might, occasionally there are things in politics where you're like, well, I don't really know if I have a strong opinion on that. But Roe versus Wade seems to be an opinion, or seems to be a decision that every single person has their own opinion about. And I think that that really kind of makes it very challenging. And as you said, like as a business owner, you do have to weigh those decisions, and it's just really not that easy. But one
Yeah.
of the things that I did see in the article was a quote from the president and CEO of the financial brand, whose name is Jeffrey Pilcher. And his quote was, "I keep politics and all political issues out of my event entirely. Money drives our decisions, not the political issue du jour." And I have to say that when I read that, I wondered like how women might feel about that statement in regards to Roe versus Wade.
I thought about it in that context. I thought about it in how minorities feel in terms of social justice issues when it's just considered a political issue du jour. How gay people feel when things that discriminate them are considered just a
Yes,
political issue du jour. I mean,
yes,
it's people's lives that are impacted. It's
yes,
not just a political issue du jour. Like that. That one threw
yes,
me. It seems
yes,
like a really privileged opinion to say that.
yes,
So
it
I don't
certainly
know.
does.
I think it's more complicated than that, and I think on one hand, I feel like the world or our country, sorry, not the world, but like our country has become so polarized, and I wish there was ways to bring people together better. But also, you can't ignore it and say, "I'm just going to live my
No,
life like these things aren't happening and make decisions like these things don't matter." It's not the way the world's going. Especially, how much have we talked about the new workforce? Totally shifting topics for a minute, and how much they care about your values, and that it's
yes,
such a diverse group. I mean,
yes.
this
And
stuff
I think
matters.
it does matter. And I think that when you're spending money and time, which is outside of your job, when you think about joining an association, you're paying, this is for extra, and you're giving of your time, which is usually on your own personal time. So if you're doing those things, you do want to ensure that you're belonging. I feel like I would want to belong to an association that held my view, not on maybe on everything, because that's part of the polarization, but at least is willing to have a stand on certain things and discussions around those things. Because
Open
I
up
think,
conversation.
yes, just to have some conversation and to say, like, we've heard from people and we hear that you're upset and we've taken this in to an account. And maybe, like, if you have your event and it's already booked, because as you and I know from working in the trade show worlds, those are booked years in
Yeah,
advance. I mean,
5 years to 10 years. I mean, you can
yes,
have long time,
yes.
long lead time.
And a lot of what you have to take into account has always been, do we have the floor space? Do we have the hotel space? Is it in walking distance to restaurants? Now you're going to have to take in a state's political view and not consider it the political issue du jour, because it is people's lives and they are giving of their time and money to your association, and they want to make sure, I feel like, that they're being heard and cared for, at least acknowledged. Let's
Yeah.
start with the acknowledged part of it. But I mean,
Again,
it's
that's so hard. I mean, like you said at the beginning, because not everyone holds the same view, how do you make everyone feel heard? That's going to be the tough part, really tough part for associations.
it will. And I think that they'll have to reach out to their members. And while we always talked about and have talked to our clients about and have talked when we were in associations, that talking to the members is really important. And I think this is now going to be even more important, because there's all sorts of talk of different laws and regulations that we have grown to accept maybe being reversed. And people, again, it is their lives and these are important issues. So, I mean, we will certainly be following this issue and seeing how associations respond and how their members react. And I think that it will be really beneficial for all of us to just hear what associations are doing and how their members will react to it, the good and the bad. It will be great to do that. So Thanks for tuning in today. We'd love to get your feedback on how your association is handling this issue. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can respond to our question right in the app, or you can email us at info@onwardupward.com. And we'll include that email in the show notes as well. So thanks for listening. I think this was a good topic, Colleen.
Agree. Thanks everyone for listening.